The grand ballroom of the five-star hotel buzzed with energy, the clinking of glasses and bursts of laughter weaving into the soft hum of jazz music. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in a golden glow, reflecting off polished marble floors and the shimmering gowns of the attendees. It was the company's annual party, a night meant for celebration, but for Mark, it was something entirely different, a crossroads he never imagined he'd face. Mark leaned against a tall marble pillar, his suit impeccably tailored but his expression distant, a stark contrast to the merriment around him. He held a glass of whiskey, untouched, its amber contents trembling slightly as his fingers tightened around it. Across the room, his wife, Emily, was the picture of radiance. Her red dress hugged her figure, her laughter melodic as she charmed everyone in her circle. But it wasn't her captivating presence that held Mark's attention. It was the man standing far too close to her. The man leaned in, whispering something that made Emily toss her head back and laugh, her hand brushing his arm. Mark's eyes narrowed as he spotted it. A faint smear of crimson lipstick on the man's cheek. A detail most would overlook, but to Mark, it screamed volumes. His chest tightened, a storm of emotions brewing within him as he drained his glass and set it aside. Tonight wasn't just about a party. Tonight, secrets would unravel, and a decision long brewing would finally come to light. Mark had always been the dependable type, steady, hardworking, and loyal to a fault. A senior project manager at a prestigious firm, he took pride in providing a comfortable life for his wife, Emily. His days were long, filled with meetings, deadlines, and late nights at the office. But in his mind, it was all for their future. Mark believed in love, trust, and building a life together through thick and thin. He never questioned Emily's occasional distance, dismissing it as a passing phase in their marriage. After all, hadn't he always given her everything she could possibly want? But beneath Mark's stoic demeanor was a man who longed for the warmth of a genuine connection. He craved the simple joys they once shared, an impromptu date night, her laugh that once lit up his world, and the way she used to look at him with admiration. Lately, those moments had grown rare, replaced by a growing chasm he didn't know how to bridge. Emily was the kind of woman who could command attention the moment she walked into a room. Her charisma and sharp wit made her a social butterfly, adored by her friends and colleagues alike. On the surface, she was the perfect wife, poised, supportive, and always by Mark's side at formal events. But underneath that polished exterior lay a woman grappling with dissatisfaction. She felt trapped in a monotonous routine. Mark's long hours at work left her lonely, and though she appreciated the material comforts he provided, she yearned for excitement and spontaneity, things their marriage seemed to lack. That's when she met Ryan, a charming coworker who made her feel alive in ways she hadn't felt in years. What began as harmless flirtation soon spiraled into something far more dangerous. Yet, Emily convinced herself that as long as she kept her two lives separate, no one would get hurt. Ryan was everything Mark wasn't, at least in Emily's eyes. Suave, confident, and always armed with a sly smile, he had a knack for making those around him feel special. To Ryan, life was a game and he loved playing it. He thrived on the thrill of forbidden connections, carefully weaving his web of charm around Emily until she was completely ensnared. He knew how to say all the right things, his words dripping with reassurance and seduction. To him, Emily was just another conquest, a fleeting thrill in his otherwise mundane life. Mark's dedication to his job left him frequently absent, both physically and emotionally. Early mornings and late nights became his norm, while Emily spent her days indulging in social gatherings, yoga classes, and lunches with friends. The growing divide between them was unspoken but palpable. Mark would come home to a quiet house, his dinner left cold on the table, while Emily often claimed she was out with friends. Their conversations had dwindled to logistics, bills, schedules, and pleasantries. The love that once bonded them now felt like a distant memory, replaced by an invisible wall neither dared to address. Mark couldn't pinpoint the exact moment when he started to suspect Emily, but the signs were impossible to ignore once he began noticing them. At first, it was subtle. Emily's routines, once predictable and comforting, had started to shift. She began staying out later than usual, citing yoga classes that suddenly extended into dinner plans with friends he'd never met. Weekends, once reserved for lazy mornings together, now saw her dashing off to errands that took hours. And then there was her phone. Emily, who used to leave her phone lying around the house, now kept it glued to her side. She'd glance at it with a nervous smile when notifications pinged, her fingers flying across the screen before the device was tucked away. One evening, Mark entered the living room to find her sitting on the couch, phone in hand, her expression one of delight. She didn't notice him at first, but when she did, her smile vanished, replaced by a hurried excuse about work emails. Her demeanor toward him had grown colder too. Conversations were brief and mechanical. Her laughter, a sound he once cherished, became rare. She seemed distracted, distant, and even irritated by his attempts to bridge the gap. The intimate moments they shared dwindled until they became nothing more than a memory. Mark tried to dismiss it all, blaming his own paranoia, but a nagging voice in his mind refused to be silenced. One night, as Emily slept beside him, her phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. The screen lit up, and though Mark hesitated, the name flashing on the screen, Ryan, made his heart sink. He didn't recognize the name, but the text, "Can't stop thinking about earlier, winky face," told him everything he needed to know. The walls felt like they were closing in on him. Mark spent the rest of that night staring at the ceiling, a mix of anger, disbelief, and heartbreak coursing through him. When dawn broke, he resolved to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Over the next few weeks, Mark became an investigator in his own life. He paid closer attention to Emily's excuses, her comings and goings, and her guarded behavior. Once, he overheard her on a hushed phone call, her tone warm and flirtatious in a way she hadn't been with him in years. Another time, he noticed a receipt in her purse for an expensive restaurant he knew they hadn't visited together. The final confirmation came when Mark followed her one evening after she claimed to be meeting friends. From a safe distance, he watched as she entered a cozy bar and greeted Ryan with a kiss that was anything but platonic. The scene played out like a nightmare he couldn't wake from, each moment burning into his mind. That night, Mark sat alone in their bedroom, grappling with the weight of betrayal. Waves of hurt and anger washed over him, but beneath it all was a quiet determination. Emily's actions had shattered his world, but he would not crumble. He would confront the truth head-on and make sure she understood the consequences of her choices. Emily had been looking forward to the company party for weeks. The moment she saw the invitation on their kitchen counter, her face lit up in a way Mark hadn't seen in years. "It's been forever since we had a proper night out," she said, her voice laced with excitement. She talked endlessly about the dress she planned to wear, the people she hoped to meet, and how much fun it would be. Mark, ever the supportive husband, agreed to go, though he knew her enthusiasm wasn't about spending time with him. For Mark, the party wasn't just an event. It was an opportunity. He had spent weeks piecing together the fragments of Emily's betrayal, and now he was determined to see it with his own eyes. Quietly, he resolved that this night would be the turning point. The evening arrived, and Emily was radiant in a scarlet dress that hugged her figure, her makeup flawless and her hair styled to perfection. As they entered the grand ballroom, she immediately gravitated toward a group of colleagues, her laughter ringing out like a bell. Mark stayed a step behind, blending into the crowd with a practiced air of indifference. He wasn't here to enjoy himself. He was here to confirm what he already knew. Mark kept a discreet eye on Emily as she mingled, her charm on full display. She flitted from group to group, her presence magnetic, but it wasn't long before she found him. Ryan. Mark's heart sank as he watched the familiar way they interacted. Ryan leaned in close, his hand brushing Emily's arm, their conversation punctuated by shared smiles and knowing glances. Then he saw it, the faint smear of red lipstick on Ryan's cheek. It was subtle, barely noticeable under the dim lighting, but it was there. Mark's grip on his whiskey glass tightened as a wave of anger and heartbreak surged through him. He turned away, breathing deeply, his mind racing. Part of him wanted to storm over, to confront them both and let the truth explode in front of everyone. But another part, the calmer part, reminded him of his plan. Instead, Mark waited. He observed them from a distance, his emotions carefully masked. He allowed the moment to simmer, ensuring that when he acted, it would be deliberate and unforgettable. As the night wore on, Mark approached Emily while she stood with Ryan. "Emily," he said, his voice calm but firm, "could I have a word?" The two exchanged glances, Ryan stepping aside with a smirk that only fueled Mark's resolve. Away from the crowd, Mark pulled a crisp envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to Emily. "This," he said quietly, "is for you. Read it when you have a moment." Confused, Emily took the envelope, her eyes narrowing as she glanced at the bold title on the papers inside. Separation Agreement. She froze, the color draining from her face as she looked up at Mark. "You don't have to explain," Mark continued, his tone still composed. "I already know. And now, so will everyone else." He nodded toward Ryan, who was now watching from across the room, his confidence visibly shaken. Emily's embarrassment turned to panic as murmurs began to spread among the partygoers. Faces turned toward them, curiosity and judgment in their eyes. Ryan shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny, his earlier smugness replaced by a nervous energy. Mark didn't stay to watch the fallout. He walked away, his head held high, leaving Emily and Ryan to face the consequences of their choices. The weight of betrayal still hung heavy on his heart, but for the first time in months, he felt a sense of clarity. Behind him, the party buzzed with whispers, the perfect backdrop to the unraveling of a carefully kept secret. Mark didn't need to look back. He knew the message had been delivered, and his life was now his to reclaim. For Emily, the decision to stray from her marriage wasn't something she had planned, nor was it something she felt entirely at peace with. It began as a whisper of dissatisfaction, a small voice in the back of her mind that grew louder with every late-night Mark spent at the office and every conversation that felt more like a checklist than a connection. She loved Mark, or at least she told herself she did. He was a good man, reliable and kind, but somewhere along the way, their relationship had lost its spark. The romance that once defined their bond had faded into routine, leaving Emily feeling more like a fixture in his life than his partner. She felt invisible, unappreciated, and she began to crave something more, something exciting, something forbidden. Enter Ryan. From the moment they met at a team meeting, he had a way of making her feel seen. He complimented her intelligence, her wit, and her beauty, all things she hadn't heard from Mark in years. At first, their connection was harmless. A shared joke here, a lingering glance there. But Ryan was persistent, his charm disarming, and Emily found herself drawn to him in ways she couldn't explain. He made her feel alive again, as if she'd been sleepwalking through her marriage and he was the jolt that woke her up. Still, there were moments of guilt. Late at night, as she lay next to Mark, she would stare at the ceiling and wonder how things had come to this. She told herself it wasn't entirely her fault, that Mark's neglect had driven her into Ryan's arms. But deep down, she knew better. She knew the affair was a choice, one she continued to make despite the growing weight of her shame. Emily became a master of hiding her inner conflict, masking her guilt with a confident smile and an air of nonchalance. She convinced herself that as long as no one found out, she wasn't truly hurting anyone. Yet, there were cracks in her facade, moments of hesitation when Ryan pushed her further into risky situations, moments when she caught herself wondering if the thrill was worth the cost. When Mark handed her the separation papers at the party, it was as if her entire world came crashing down. For the first time, she felt exposed, vulnerable, and utterly powerless. The whispers of partygoers swirled around her, their judgment piercing through the confidence she had worked so hard to project. Desperation gripped her as she tried to regain control of the narrative. She wanted to explain, to plead with Mark, to turn the tables on Ryan. But the truth was inescapable. She had gambled with her marriage, and now, the consequences were unfolding before her eyes. Emily was left with nothing but regret, wondering if the fleeting thrill of forbidden love had been worth the price of everything she'd lost. Mark didn't rush into confrontation after discovering Emily's betrayal. The initial wave of heartbreak and anger had nearly overwhelmed him, but he knew that acting impulsively wouldn't serve him. Instead, he channeled his emotions into a quiet determination to take control of the situation. He wasn't just going to expose the affair. He was going to do it in a way that left no room for Emily to manipulate the narrative. The first step in Mark's plan was gathering irrefutable evidence. He began by keeping a journal of Emily's behavior, noting her unusual outings, cryptic phone calls, and sudden need for privacy. He discreetly checked their shared financial accounts and found charges for dinners and gifts he hadn't been a part of. Then he dug deeper. With the help of a trusted friend who worked in IT, Mark recovered deleted messages from Emily's phone. The messages confirmed everything he already knew but also revealed the depth of her relationship with Ryan. Mark didn't stop there. He hired a private investigator to follow Emily for a few days, capturing photos of her with Ryan. The investigator's report, complete with timestamps and locations, painted a clear picture of their affair. With this evidence in hand, Mark felt a strange sense of clarity. The betrayal still hurt, but he realized he was no longer tethered to Emily emotionally. He deserved better, and now he was determined to make her face the consequences of her actions. The company party provided the perfect stage for his plan. Emily had been excited about the event for weeks, and Mark knew she'd insist they attend together. He acted as though everything was normal, playing the role of the supportive husband while quietly preparing for the night. In his pocket, he carried a neatly prepared separation agreement, complete with documentation of her infidelity as grounds for the dissolution of their marriage. At the party, Mark executed his plan with calculated precision. He watched Emily from a distance, observing her interactions with Ryan and noting the subtle ways they betrayed their connection. He allowed the lipstick-stained cheek moment to unfold, using it as the final confirmation of everything he'd uncovered. His heart still ached, but his resolve was unshaken. When the time came to confront her, Mark ensured the moment was impactful yet dignified. He approached her calmly, his voice steady as he handed her the envelope. He didn't raise his voice or create a dramatic scene. He let the evidence speak for itself. By presenting the separation papers in such a public setting, he left no room for Emily to twist the story or deny the truth. Mark's growth was evident in the way he carried himself throughout the ordeal. He wasn't the broken man Emily had expected. He was composed, confident, and ready to move forward without her. His plan wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about reclaiming his dignity and showing her that he wouldn't be reduced to a victim. As he walked away from the confrontation, Mark felt a sense of liberation. The weight of betrayal had been lifted, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had taken control of his life. The affair had marked the end of one chapter, but it also signified the beginning of a new one where Mark would prioritize his own happiness and self-respect. The fallout from the company party was swift and unforgiving for Emily. Word of her affair spread through the office like wildfire, fueled by the whispers of colleagues who had witnessed the public confrontation. Her once-admired charm and confidence were now overshadowed by scandal. Social gatherings that used to welcome her with open arms became awkward and cold, her invitations drying up as her credibility crumbled. Even Ryan, the man she had risked everything for, distanced himself, unwilling to deal with the mess left in the wake of their affair. Emily was left to pick up the pieces alone, her regret weighing heavily on her. Late at night, in the quiet of her now empty home, she replayed the events of that night over and over, wishing she could turn back time. She realized too late that the fleeting thrill of her betrayal had cost her the one person who had truly cared for her. But Mark was gone, and with him the life they had built together. For Mark, the confrontation marked the beginning of his liberation. Free from the shadow of betrayal, he poured his energy into rediscovering himself. He began running in the mornings, something he had always talked about but never found time for. He reconnected with old friends, relishing in the warmth of relationships that weren't tainted by deceit. Therapy sessions helped him process his emotions and heal from the pain of the betrayal, and with each passing day, he felt a little lighter. Professionally, Mark thrived. No longer distracted by the turmoil at home, he threw himself into his work, earning recognition and even a promotion. On weekends, he took up cooking, finding joy in simple activities that allowed him to focus on himself. The thought of a new romantic relationship crossed his mind, but he didn't rush it. For now, he was content with the peace and clarity that came from being on his own. One evening, as he walked along a quiet park trail, the setting sun casting golden hues over the trees, Mark reflected on how far he had come. He realized he wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. The betrayal that had once threatened to break him had instead revealed his strength, teaching him the value of self-respect and the importance of trust. As he gazed at the horizon, he allowed himself a small smile. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt full of possibility. Mark's journey from betrayal to self-discovery was one of pain, growth, and ultimately, redemption. The company party, with its vibrant energy and shocking revelations, became the turning point in a story that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. Emily's choices had unraveled their marriage, exposing the cracks that had formed over years of neglect and dissatisfaction. But it was Mark's response, calm, calculated, and dignified, that defined the outcome. Emily's fall from grace was a stark reminder of the consequences of betrayal. The allure of forbidden love had cost her everything, leaving her to navigate the wreckage of her choices alone. Meanwhile, Mark emerged from the ordeal stronger and more self-assured, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. At its core, this story was about the power of self-respect and the importance of trust in any relationship. Betrayal may break bonds, but it can also be a catalyst for growth and change. Mark's journey proved that even in the face of heartbreak, it's possible to rise, rebuild, and embrace the future with hope. And as he stepped into this new chapter of his life, Mark carried with him the quiet confidence that comes from knowing his worth.